My name is Yvette Finkelstein. I'm a member of the Young Israel of New Rochelle, and it's my pleasure to speak to you tonight as a representative of the Women's Initiative for Jewish Studies. If you have not turned off your cell phones, if you've forgotten, please do so now. We are most excited to welcome you to our first lecture of the year. Our mission statement is short but dynamic. The Women's Initiative for Jewish Studies is a new program whose mission is to introduce outstanding women Jewish studies scholars to the Westchester community. Leaving shul on Shabbat a few weeks ago, a friend said to me, "There is an incredible amount of Torah learning that is happening all around us." The opportunities for learning are endless, and for women scholars especially, the availability of learning opportunities and teaching at the highest levels of Jewish studies are amazing. We are thrilled to share the advanced scholarship of women scholars in Jewish studies to our friends in the Westchester community and beyond. Before I introduce this evening's speaker, there are a few people I'd like to thank. First, I'd like to acknowledge Rabbi and Mrs. Abby Fink, and thank you for your encouragement and support of this program. We are most grateful to both of you. I'd like to thank Mark Seymour, the president of the Board of Directors of Young Israel of New Rochelle, and Joey Bernstein, vice president and executive board chair, for believing in this program and sharing our excitement in introducing it to the shul and the community. A special thank you to Stan Weiss for volunteering his video expertise so that we can create a video library of our programs. Barbara Bolsham and Rita Kaplan in the shul office have offered us invaluable support. We thank Mr. Meyer Koplau for his generous sponsorship of this lecture in memory of his wife and a good friend of ours, Ellen Koplau. My last but extremely important thank you is to the amazing committee of volunteers who work tirelessly in so many ways to ensure the success of this program. You will see the names of our committee members on this flyer, right here, as well as a listing of some of our future programming. In addition to the schedule you see on this flyer is Tuesday, March 17th, when our speaker will be Sharon Lieberman-Mintz, the curator of Jewish art at the Library of the Jewish Theological Seminary and the senior consultant of Judaica and Hebraica at Sotheby's in New York. Our last program of the year will be in May. If you have not yet signed in, please do so at the end of the evening. So everybody will be receiving reminders via email. The format of this evening will be Professor Rosensweig's presentation, followed by a brief time devoted to your questions. It is now my genuine pleasure to introduce Professor Smadar Rosensweig. Professor Rosensweig is currently a professor of Bible at Yeshiva University Stern College for Women. She received her BA at Barnard College and her MA, a Master of Philosophy in Jewish History at Columbia University. She is the daughter of Rabbi Dr. David Eliach and Dr. Yafa Eliach, renowned Holocaust scholar. Professor Rosensweig delivers shiurim and lectures extensively throughout the New York metropolitan area and across the country.
So much. It's really a pleasure to be here tonight. I would like to say this shiur in the zchut of Eliyahu Aharon ben Yocheved Yuta Etel. And tonight what we're going to do is we are going to discuss the story of Levi throughout the entire Chumash. We're going to start in Sefer Breshit and we're going to end in Sefer Dvarim. What we're going to see, very interestingly, is that throughout the entire Chamisha Chumashim, throughout the entire Pentateuch, there is a narrative arc of Shevet Levi, and we're going to look at this narrative arc and try to see what is the message of Shevet Levi, starting in Sefer Breshit and ending in Sefer Dvarim. We're going to do this through the understanding of the story itself, and we're also going to see the language that is used. In addition, what we're going to do is we're going to analyze Rashi's commentary, right, on the history of Shevet Levi. Meaning, what is going on with Shevet Levi, and what is the inherent message, right, of Levi's life and of the history of the Shevet itself. In Tanakh, and especially in Chumash, we're going to be really focusing on Chumash today. The history of Shevet Levi is very interesting because, on the one hand, Chumash is about the history of Am Yisrael, but there's also a lot of material dedicated to Shevet Levi. And the question is why? What is it about Shevet Levi that is unique, right, and is different than the other Shvatim in the Chumash and the other components of Am Yisrael? So we're going to jump right in. The first time we meet Shevet Levi in Sefer Breshit, in the book of Genesis, is the story of Dinah, which is a very interesting story that we have. We're just going to use Dinah and the whole story as a jumping point. Of course, this story is really rife with so much information and also ideas, but we are not going to be dealing with this story per se in its development of the story of Dinah, but maybe another time when we meet again. So here we're beginning. We're in source number 1. This is going to be a very source-driven, text-driven class. So we're going to be, following the sources, and we're going to see the ascent of Levi from an outlaw, right, to actually the religious establishment. How do we have Shevet Levi, which really is on the fringes of the religious establishment, right, in the beginning, in the book of Genesis, and all of a sudden it ends up, right, as the religious establishment? How do we see this narrative really progressing? And that's what we're going to try to understand today. The story of Levi starts with the story of Dinah. So we're in source number 1. We're in Breshit, Perek Lamed Dalet. I'm going to read the Hebrew, but also translate and speak in English. But every source is translated into English, except for very few that it was very hard for me to find the English translation. What happens? Yaakov heard, Yaakov shama ki timei Dinah bito. Right? Yaakov hears that Dinah has been defiled. Right? Dinah was raped by Shechem, and Shechem and his father come to Yaakov and say, right, my son Shechem wants to marry Dinah, and what is Yaakov's response? Yaakov's response is silence. Vehecherish Yaakov ad boam. Until the brothers and sons come home, Yaakov has no response. But we see, even though the language doesn't say it, usually vayidom, hecherish, when someone is silent in a certain situation, we see that they're really pained, and they really just don't know what to say. When Bnei Yaakov come back, when the sons come back from the field, when they hear the news, vayitatzu, they are really very saddened, right? And they're very angry. Vayichar lahem me'od, ki nevala asa b'Yisrael. Because this is not a scandal, as it says it in the English. It's not such a good translation. What's a nivala? An abomination, right? An abomination was done, right, to the family, right? You can't do this to Dinah, the daughter of Yaakov. This should not be done. And what happens? Bnei Yaakov come with a response, right? So Yaakov is not the responder here. The brothers are the responders. And they answer to Shechem and Hamor, and they say, you know what? They speak b'mirma. And here, the English translation is a good translation. They answer with cunning. And what is interesting about the word mirma here, who also responded b'mirma, or who was understood to answer b'mirma with cunning, also in a similar, not similar situation, but in a situation, right, where a certain decision had to be made, right? Ba'achicha b'mirma vayikach et birchatecha. The same language, the Torah uses the same language that is used when Yaakov came to his father Yitzchak and took the bracha of Esav. So the same language is used, Ba'achicha b'mirma. Here, the brothers answer b'mirma, and they answer because in the back of their minds, what do they have? That their sister Dinah was defiled. So when they're answering, and they're going to be telling the entire city to do a brit milah, to do circumcision, the question is, what is running through their minds? Are they already planning to kill the entire city? Do they want them to convert, and then they really will have relations with them and be friends with them, and they'll be one family? Is this a way of converting and spreading Judaism or Israelite religion, right, to Israel at this point? The Torah doesn't tell us in the Pshat. Vayamru alehem, so the brothers answer, you know what, we can't let our sister marry you, right, because you are not circumcised, and that will be an embarrassment to us. But if you all get circumcised, right, then we will be as one. Look at Pasuk Kaval 21. When Shechem and Hamor come to the city and tell everyone to have a circumcision, they explain it, Ha'anashim ha'ele shleimim hemitanu. They are honest with us, open with us, at peace with us, which means the way Shechem and Hamor, the father and son, right, come and explain to their city that everyone should be circumcised, is that they understand, right, this agreement with Bnei Yaakov, with the sons of Yaakov, as almost like a peace treaty, right, as a union, as an acceptance, right? So they're telling everyone, they're shleimim, and again, the word shleimim is from the word shalom, peace, wholesome, meaning the understanding of Shechem and Hamor, and what they're relating to the city is that this is something harmonious, this is something peaceful. So the entire city, Pasuk, right, Kafdal, the entire city listens to Hamor and Shechem, and every male is circumcised. And now comes the important part for us. On the third day, when everyone is in pain, Vayikhu shnei bnei Yaakov, Shimon v'Levi, the two sons, right? Till now, all the sons speak as one. Now, two are separated out. Shimon and Levi, the sons of Yaakov, who are the brothers of Dinah, because they are defending her honor, right? Each one takes his sword, and they come to the city Betach, the city which is secure, which feels sure in its relation with Am Yisrael, or with Yaakov and his family. So here, they accepted this because they were accepting and expecting peace. Number two, when Shimon and Levi come, they're coming on a city that is unsuspecting, right? They really expect peace. They expect honesty, openness, right? And the two sons of Yaakov come, and they have ish harbo. Each one takes his sword. We also know, again, the references here are very clear. What is the bracha, what is the blessing, right, that Yitzchak gave to Esav? Al charbacha tichyeh. You should live on your sword. So the reference very clearly here is what kind of life are Shimon and Levi choosing? They could do the Yaakov model, Hakol Kol Yaakov, or they could pick the Esav model, which is Al charbacha tichyeh. The fact that they are taking the sword, and it's written very clearly, right, to make that reference here, that Shimon and Levi are really veering off the path, and they're really taking the model of Esav as their model. They come to the city which is secure, Vayaharbu kol zachar. They kill every male in the city. Ve'et Chamor ve'et Shechem, then they go to kill Chamor and Shechem, also by sword, and then they take Dinah from the house of Shechem and they leave. Again, the Torah is not making any value judgments right here. Later on, we're going to see it does. But what's fascinating is that where should the story stop? The story should really stop here. They got their objective. Who did they take out from bondage? They took Dinah. They saved her, right? We can ask the question, and again, we're not going to do this tonight because it really will take 3 hours if we get into the entire discussion. But was it right or wrong? Did Yaakov agree or disagree? And it was this week's parsha, so maybe everyone already discussed it over Shabbat, right? So were they right by killing the entire city? Did they kill the entire city because they felt they would defend Shechem and Hamor when they wanted to kill, right, the leader of the town and his son? So they killed all the males? Or was it gratuitous? That is the question we want to ask. Either way, the story really should have ended here, right? They took Dinah and they leave. But look how the rest of the story unfolds. And this is what is key for us as well. Pasuk Kaf Zayin, verse 27. Bnei Yaakov ba'u ala chalalim. The sons of Yaakov come upon the slain individuals vayavozu ha'ir asher timu et achotam. If you want to keep the moral high ground, what should you do? You should just save Dinah. Take her out, free her, and take her with you. But what they do is that they plunder the entire city. And again, vayivez Esav et habchorah. The same language that is used with Esav, the Torah is using here with Shimon and Levi, which means it wants to make a correspondence between Shimon and Levi and using the tactics of Esav. Verse 28, not only, right, do they take the booty from the slain, right, they also take all the sheep and all the cattle and all the donkeys and everything that's in the city and everything that's in the field. And then they take all the wealth, pasuk kaftet, and all the children and all the women they take into captivity. And again, they plunder everything that's in everyone's house, which means the Torah is emphasizing the collateral damage and the excessive cruelty, right, and the excessive damage that is being done by Shimon and Levi. Here, clearly, the way the Torah is writing it, there is a very deep criticism of Shimon and Levi. This is not the way, right, to behave. Finally, who responds? Pasuk Lamed is the first time we have Yaakov's response. And Yaakov says to Shimon and Levi, even though they were the instigators, but then all of Bnei Yaakov take a part of it, he criticizes Shimon and Levi because they were really the instigators. Vayomer Yaakov el Shimon veLevi, right? Ve'el Levi. Achartem oti lahavisheni. You have defamed me, right? To discredit me with all the people around. And I am few in numbers, and they could just come and destroy me. So it could be that's a practical response. Oh, you know, by being so violent, it's not smart politically because now they're going to come and destroy you. It's not that, oh, you were morally and ethically right, wrong. And they respond, Vayomru, verse 31, Hachezonah yaseh achotenu. We had to respond because they cannot treat our sister as a harlot. And we had to respond. That is the response of Shimon and Levi, and Yaakov does not answer back. That is how the story ends. And the question is, so who is right? We're just going to touch, again, the tip of the iceberg. And I just want to bring two different views, and we're going to see that a few Mefarshim have these views. We're now in number 2, Breshit Rabbah. Breshit Rabbah is the earliest midrashic explanation that we have for the book of Genesis, because there is no halacha on the book of Genesis, so the earliest material that we have is this midrash. Vayomer Yaakov el Shimon ve'el Levi, achartem oti. So the midrash is trying to explain the words. What does it mean, achartem oti? What's the word achartem? Right? We use the word defamed. So the midrash says, Rabbanan, the rabbis, say, Tzlula hayta chavit va'achartem ota. My reputation was clear, like a barrel, right? Before you shake it up with all the muddy water, everything settles to the bottom. And it's a great reference because originally, what did Yaakov have in his reputation? He had some mud in the reputation because how did he really buy the Bechorah? How did he really gain the blessing? Right? By coming to Yitzchak, right, and really saying that he's Esav. Right? He buys it from Esav, right, when Esav is really not completely coherent, even though later after he eats, he's coherent and he rejects the Bechorah. But the image is wonderful because what is it saying? Here's a barrel. It had some mud in it, but finally what happened to the mud? It settled down. And now my reputation is clear. I finally was able to regain my reputation. And what did the brothers do? They shook it up again. They muddied the waters again. So now they're bringing up all the dirt, right? So now my reputation that I worked so hard to regain, right, is being sullied. And it's a great metaphor because what do we know about the language? Mirmah, the same language that is used with Yaakov and Esav, is the same language that is used with Shimon and Levi, which means the impression is that maybe they're referencing what Yaakov did, and they think those tactics might be fine. Okay. So Rabbanan say, finally, right, I was able to make my reputation clear, and now you're muddying the waters. But Rabbi Yehuda Bar Simon says, Achura hayta chavit v'tzalalnu ota. If you were quiet when Dinah was taken, and when they came back and asked you for you to say something, and you were quiet, then what does it seem like? That you're letting anything happen to Dinah and you're not defending her, you're not saying anything. So we cleared the air, we cleared the waters, which means we made it clear that our reputation cannot be sullied by the actions of others. That's the two views in the Midrash. So the Midrash doesn't come one side or the other. The Midrash gives us the two options. So we have different views. The Rabbeinu B'chaye, number B, he says, Achartem oti, you have muddied my name. How did you do that? Lishpoch dam chinam. When you killed innocent victims in Shechem, then you have sullied my reputation. So clearly, what is his view? That by killing the males in the city, what did they do? They killed innocent blood, which means it wasn't right to kill the males in the city, and What's the other view? Sforno says, not only that, sheshikharnu be'emunatenu achar shenimolu. Once they were circumcised, then what was the agreement? We're at peace. You're coming into our religion. Which means once you are joining us, we can't then stab you in the back and say, oh, we're tricking you. Which means once they did this, and they were clear, and they felt that this was going to be peaceful, and this was going to be a real peace treaty, right? An agreement, a covenant, then by really lying and using the religion, right, as a ruse, then you really sullied our reputation. So the Rabbeinu B'chaye and the Sforno clearly are on the side that Yaakov is critical and he's correct. The Malbim, though, takes the side of the second view in the Midrash, Rabbi Yehuda bar Simon. What does the Malbim say? The Malbim says, in the bolded words, "V'tzarich laharot lahem ki yesh le'el yadenu lihinakem min hanogea banu l'ra'ah." What do Jews have to show? And it's interesting, the Malbim is in the late 19th century, right, in Eastern Europe. What do Jews have to show? They have to show that if you touch one of ours, what do we have the right to do? We can avenge that individual, which means we are not victims. And that is the view the Malbim says is the right view here, that Shimon and Levi were correct. Okay. What we're going to see is how does this idea and how does this story play out throughout all of Chumash? And that's our goal for today. We're going to use the language from this story, we're going to see the lessons from this story, and we're going to see what are the echoes, right, and the ramifications of this story throughout all of Chumash. That's our goal for today. So, right now we're going to the story of Mechirat Yosef, of the selling of Yosef, and we're just doing 2 psukim from there. We're on number 3, big number 3, right? They see Yosef from afar, and already what do they plan to do? Right? They plan to kill him. Pasuk Yutet says, verse 19, Vayomru ish el achiv hine ba lachalomot halazeba. One brother says to the other, here is the dreamer who's coming, and of course we all know they plan to kill him. Now the pshat just means the brothers said one to the other. But we're going to see that the Midrash, and Rashi's going to quote it, is going to say, what does it mean one brother said to the other? Who are the brothers who are always in trouble with each other and always planning poorly? That's going to be Shimon and Levi. Which means the Midrash is going to draw a line, right, to say that who are the ones who are always planning, right, nefarious deeds, right, in Sefer Breshit? It's always Shimon and Levi. They're a bad combination. And whenever we see one brother says to the other, it's always Shimon and Levi. Okay? But in the Pshat, it's just the brothers in general. Now we get to the last brachot of Yaakov in the end of Sefer Breshit. Now we're going to see, so what is Yaakov's final word to Shimon and Levi? Because where didn't he have a final word? He doesn't have a final word when it happens, because they say, oh, is our sister going to be made to the Zonah? And what happens? Yaakov doesn't respond. So the question is Yaakov going to respond, and what is he going to say? An important point for us to understand, in the end of Sefer Breshit, whenever you have, right, the brachot in the end of Sefer Breshit decide the destiny for all of Tanakh. We'll see, what do we know about Reuven? Reuven had the potential to be the Bechor, the eldest, the chosen one, but because he did not know how to stand up and really make good leadership decisions, right, and instead he gets involved in Yaakov's personal life with Bilhah, right, who is the Pilegesh of Yaakov, and he gets involved in affairs he shouldn't really be involved with, he loses the leadership position. If Reuven, who's the firstborn, loses the leadership position, who should rightfully get it? It should go to Shimon and Levi, because they're next, right? But what do we see is Yaakov's words to Shimon and Levi. And once Reuven loses the leadership in Sefer Breshit, he loses it for all of Tanakh, for all of Chumash, and especially for all of Chumash, for all of Tanakh. What do we know about Yehuda? I just want to jump down to Yehuda. What do we know about Yehuda? Because he's the one who steps up, right? And he defends Yosef, and defending him in the sense that he sells him but doesn't kill him, and then he goes and takes responsibility for Binyamin, and then he steps up to Yosef and he takes a leadership role. Once Yaakov defines him as the leader of Am Yisrael, throughout all of Tanakh, leadership is secured for Shevet Yehuda. Also in the blessings of Yaakov, who gets a double portion? Yosef. Once Yosef gets a double portion in the end of Sefer Breshit, he is going to be the Bechor who gets double portion of Ephraim and Menashe throughout all of Tanakh. which means whatever is decided in the end of Sefer Breshit, that sets your destiny throughout all of Tanakh. But the question for us is going to be, so what's going to be the destiny of Shimon and Levi? Shimon and Levi are going to be the ones that break the mold. Whereas everybody else has to fulfill their destiny that's already decided in Sefer Breshit. We're going to see that Shimon and Levi have a chance, right, to do a redemption, a tikkun, a rectification for what their situation is in the end of Sefer Breshit. Which means your destiny is not carved in stone. Because if you would look at all the others, everyone's destiny is carved in stone. Whatever it says in the end of Sefer Breshit, that's what you are throughout Tanakh. What's fascinating about Shimon and Levi is that they get a rebuke here. They do not get a bracha. They don't get a blessing. And yet, we're going to see how each one charts their course, right, throughout all of Chumash. So let's now just do the bracha of Shimon and Levi. So we're on verse number 5. We're on page number 3, verse number 5. Shimon v'Levi achim, klei chamas mecherotehem. What does Yaakov say about them? That Shimon and Levi are brothers. We're always using them as a unit. Klei chamas mecherotehem. They're always using weapons of violence, right? I don't want to be included. B'sodam al tavo nafshi. I don't want to be included in their council. I don't want to be included in their assemblies, right? Because they have a problem with anger. Anger is considered one of their worst properties, one of their worst traits. 7, as a result, arur apam kiyaz. I'm going to curse their anger. So we're using many different ways of explaining anger. Kiba apam hargu ish, again in verse 6. Ubirtsonam ikru shor, right? They are willful. Arur apam kiyaz, so he's cursing their anger. Ve'evratam, another way to describe anger. Achalkem b'Yaakov afitzem b'Yisrael. So they're going to be dispersed among all of Am Yisrael. They can't be together, because every time they're together, they're in trouble. So they're going to be spread out among Am Yisrael. So let's see what Rashi says. Okay, everyone thinks that Rashi is a great pashtan. Rashi is the exegete, right, early medieval time period, who explains everything according to the pshat. But really, what Rashi is a master of integrating pshat and drash. Rashi wants you to understand the words of the text, but he also wants you to understand the words of the text according to the view of Chazal. And that's why, most of the time, Rashi is quoting Midrashim. Rashi is quoting the words of the sages. Now, he picks the words of the sages, the Midrashim, that correspond to the words in the text, but he wants you to understand the Torah according to the views of Chazal. So we're going to see, right, the fact that Rashi picks certain Midrashim, right, he doesn't work as an encyclopedia. So the fact that he picks certain Midrashim, he wants you to understand the Torah according to the views of the Chazal that he thinks are the main views that really work according to the language in the text. So we're going to see how Rashi does that. And sometimes he hews to the words, and sometimes we'll see he really goes far afield because he wants to make an ideological point. So now we're starting with Rashi. Shimon v'Levi achim, right? They were the ones who decided about Shechem, and they're the ones who made the decision about Yosef, because it said one brother says to the other. That's not pshat. But Rashi is quoting a midrash, right? You see the midrash. Rashi is quoting a midrash to say, Vayomer isha lachiv, one brother says to the other, right? So they were the masterminds of Shechem, and they're the masterminds of wanting to kill Yosef. Klei chamas mecherotehem, the next one, stolen instruments. What does Rashi say? Umanut shel ritzicha zo Esav. Rashi is the one who is bringing the midrash, who wants to show what? That Shimon and Levi are really acting in the way of Esav. And even though, right, Yaakov doesn't say anything early on with his brachot, then he tries, right, to really identify what are the actions and what are the ideologies of Shimon and Levi. And as a result, in the two events that are going to happen later in Chumash, right, we don't identify Shimon or Levi all the way back to Yaakov. One is in the situation of Zimri, which we're going to do, and one is in the situation of Korach. In the two situations where Levi does not act in the ultimate way, or Shimon doesn't act in the ultimate way with Zimri, then we don't identify the genealogy all the way back to Yaakov, which means I don't want to be identified with you. Which means in the Pshat and in Rashi, there's almost a rejection of Shimon and Levi, right? Which means we don't want to be identified with you. You have to be spread out. You didn't, go according to the, family model. And as a result, we don't want to be identified with you. Let's go to the last one. We're on page 5. Arura pam ki az, right? What does Rashi want to say though? Rashi wants to say, cursed be their wrath, for it is mighty. Arura pam ki az. But Rashi wants to bring, and this is not a midrash, this is Rashi's own idea, afilu bish'at tochacha lo kilel ela apam. Which means when it came to the brachot, right, he doesn't give them a bracha, and when he criticizes them, he criticizes their anger. Which means Rashi wants to emphasize that one of the biggest problems of Shimon and Levi is not so much that they didn't have the right ideas, but when they really tried to realize their ideas, they used anger, right? And they always went beyond, above and beyond the level that they really had to act when these issues came to bear. Which means when they were protesting against Dinah, they went way over, right, the amount, the limit that really would be useful and would be constructive. Achal ken b'Yaakov, and as a result, what will happen to them? They'll always be separated out. And what do we know about Levi? Levi had little settlements all over Eretz Yisrael. And what do we know about Shimon? Shimon also did not have a settlement in one place, right? It didn't have an inheritance. It was really spread around all over, and they really lived in all the different villages, and they were really absorbed into Shevet Yehudah. So that's the view of Rashi. So we see he makes comments about the past, but he also wants us to see what's going to happen future in Chumash, right, as it regards and pertains to Shevet Levi. Okay, so now we finished in Sefer Breshit, so it's not a positive outlook for Shimon and Levi, right? If we're going to say that everything in the end of Sefer Breshit really sets you for the, for your future in Tanakh, then Shimon and Levi are really not going to be successful. But if you look at it as a criticism and as a tochacha, and as something that you could learn lessons from, then the way you have to read it is that we're going to look at the rest of the narrative. Are Shimon and Levi going to learn from their mistakes in Sefer Breshit? Whereas everybody else, Yehuda learns from his mistakes already in Sefer Breshit and repents. And he says, Tzadka mimeni with Tamar, and he learns his lesson, and that's why he's successful. Yehuda has many instances and opportunities to learn from his mistakes, and he doesn't really get on the path of leadership, right? He doesn't do the right thing with Yosef, he doesn't do the right thing with Bilhah, so he has certain opportunities, but he doesn't succeed, right? So he had the opportunities. With Shimon and Levi, we only have them doing the act with Dinah. Yaakov never really responds to them. We have them selling of Yosef, right, or planning to kill him, excuse me, and there's no response to them. So the question is, right, are we waiting for all of Chumash, for Shimon and Levi to really do this tikkun, to do this tshuva, in a sense, for their actions in Sefer Breshit? And what we see that Rashi is pretty much saying that yes, we're waiting for them to do something with their anger. We're waiting for them to do something with their actions that they did in Sefer Breshit and see if they're going to develop in a certain way. And what we see throughout Chumash is that this is true. Chumash, Shmot, right? Vayikra, we're going to see Bamidbar and Dvarim, each have pieces that are going to refer back to the Dinah event and show that really Levi has rehabilitated itself. And what we're going to see about Shimon is that Shimon was not able to rehabilitate himself. And as a result, not only do Levi rehabilitate themselves into Am Yisrael, they're going to become the leaders in the religious sense of Am Yisrael. They're going to be the religious zealots of Am Yisrael. And we're going to see how they really sublimate, right, this anger and use it in certain ways in order to be religious leaders. And that is really going to be very clear in the Pshat, in the Chumash, and we're going to see how Rashi also addresses this idea. So let's go to Shmot. Right in the beginning of Sefer Shmot, right, we're on page number 5, right, we're on number 5. When we start the story of Levi, right, and I just want to make an aside, right, when we talk about the rehabilitation of Shevet Levi, who are going to be instrumental in making sure Shevet Levi is going to be rehabilitated? It's going to be the women. It's going to be Miriam, it's going to be Yocheved, it's going to be Shifra and Puah, but we're not focusing on that today, but I just wanted to stick that in. Right? So it's really the women who get Shevet Levi back on track. But here we're seeing something very interesting. Vayelech ish beit Levi. Why is the story, right, that precedes Moshe, why do we start with Vayelech ish beit Levi? Why not say Amram walks? Why don't we say Yocheved, right, and Amram get married? because really the point here is the rehabilitation of Shevet Levi. We ended Sefer Breshit that Levi really is not part of the chosen. Levi is only criticized, and we're going to see that from Shmot on, there's a rehabilitation of Shevet Levi. And it will start with Miriam and Yocheved, and again, the Medrash wants to say even the midwives are Miriam and Yocheved. But for us, what's important is that the persona of Moshe is going to be the beginning of the rehabilitation of Shevet Levi. Before, right, they did not have a focus, right? They were against authority. And we're going to see that Moshe is going to become the authority. But again, we have to see the language. How is it going to bear out? So let's go to verse 11. Right, so here we have the Levi story. Vayelech ish mi beit Levi vayikach et bat Levi. So what's going to be the Levi narrative now? So what happens? Moshe, right? Vayigdal Moshe, vayetze elechav. He goes out to his brothers. What do we know about Shevet Levi from Sefer Breshit? What do Shimon and Levi really care about? Their sister. Right? What does Moshe really care about? His brothers. He goes out and he sees their suffering. Who else suffered in Sefer Breshit? Dinah, and Shimon and Levi cared about her. Here, Moshe from Levi sees the suffering of his brethren. What does he see? Ish mitzri makeh ish ivri me'echav. He sees oppression. And what is Moshe going to do for oppression? Vayifen kol b'chol. He looks around. He sees no one's around. Vayachet hamitzri vayitmeneo b'chol. Just like Shimon and Levi used, right, brute force, killing, in order to kill the offenders, what does Moshe do? He also kills the offenders. But here, what does Moshe do? He only kills the offender, one individual. Where else, what did we see with Sefer Breshit? Collateral damage. And we see a change here. When he goes the next day, he sees two Jews fighting. And when it comes to the two Jews, he's already arguing with words. What did we see with Shimon and Levi? When Yaakov argues with them, what do? They answer with words, and they cannot be answered back. When the two answer back to Moshe, he doesn't have an answer for them. But what's interesting to us, again, is going to be, how does Rashi see this whole interlude? So we're now on page 6. And this is so interesting, because here you again see that Rashi wants to connect the story of Dinah with the story of Moshe. Why does Moshe smite this Egyptian? Rashi is the only commentator who will bring this unbelievable midrash. What is this midrash? What is this Egyptian really doing? Right? He is really having relations with this Hebrew's, with this Israelite's wife, unbeknownst to this Israelite. And that bothers Moshe terribly, and that's why he smites the Egyptian. Which means, on what grounds does Rashi want to say, and he brings this midrash, but no other commentator brings this midrash. Rashi sees that it's very germane to this situation. Which means, what does Rashi see? Right? There's impropriety here. A woman in Am Yisrael is being mistreated. Right? And what should be the action of Moshe? He has to kill the Egyptian, which means Rashi wants to show a correspondence between the Dinah situation and Moshe's situation. Let's go on. Vayifen kol v'chol. What does Rashi say? Ra'a ma'asa lo babayit u'ma'asa lo basadeh. What were the two words that were used over and over and over again in the story of Dinah? Right? That they went and took the booty from the house and in the field. In the house and in the field. Right? They had to wait until the men came back from the field. What does Rashi want to show? Right? When he saw what he did in the house and in the field, again, a correspondence to what we saw with Dinah, right? That's why Moshe had to act. And what does he act? Vayar ki einish. What does it mean, vayar ki einish? What does Rashi say? And he saw there was no man. He saw there was no man destined to convert. What happened in Shechem? Right? They converted, but they weren't true to the agreement of conversion, and they killed everybody. So Moshe wants to make sure that when he smites this Egyptian, there's no one in the future that's going to convert. Again, no other Mefarshim bring in these references. Many times when Rashi brings in a reference, what do other Mefarshim do? They follow suit. But Rashi is very clear. He wants to make this point, and he sees it in this way. And further on, when Moshe smote the Egyptian, the clear implication in the Pshat is what? How did he smite him? With his hand, with a stick, with something. Right? But it was a physical smiting. What does Rashi say? Halahargeni ata omer. Right? How did he kill him? With a divine name. Which means Moshe should not use, right, the same actions, right, that Shimon and Levi used. And what did they use? They used the actions of Esav. right? They, did not act in the proper Yaakov way. So again, Rashi wants to show, what is this the beginning of? This is the beginning of the rehabilitation of Shevet Levi. What's happening? No collateral damage, right? They're not using the ways of Esav. And we have this with the Egel. What happens with the golden calf? Moshe, right, sees what's happening when he comes down with the Luchot HaBrit, and he says, Mila Hashem Elai, he calls people to come for him, and who come? All of Shevet Levi. And all of Shevet Levi come, and they take their swords, only because, why? Look at verse 27, we're number 6, because Moshe tells them to take their swords in the name of God, which means in Sefer Breshit, how do they take their swords? On their own initiative. We know that Yaakov's not really behind them, and he criticizes them for what they do. But here, right, they're killing everyone who worshipped the golden calf. Moshe is telling them to take the sword, and they don't even recognize family members. If a family member behaved untoward, right, they are being punished. Which means here we see a rehabilitation of all of Shevet Levi, not just Moshe. And what do? No collateral damage. They killed 3,000 people. So you're going to say, they killed 3,000 people. What do we know in Tanakh? 3,000 people is a low number. Usually it's 27,000, 50,000, 70,000 people who are killed, right? So the fact that it's 3,000 people, and it also says only the people who worship the golden calf, which means what is happening here? No collateral damage. When they take weapons, they're taking them in the name of God, right? They're not identifying family members for the sake of family members, but people who really either deserve, right, the punishment or not. And what happens as a result? Verse 29, as a result, Moshe says, right, you're going to get a blessing today. So the blessing they didn't get from Yaakov in the end of Sefer Breshit, now they're going to get a blessing. And again, what is Rashi's explanation here? Right? Rashi explains, Kol b'nei Levi, mikan shekol hashevet kasher. Which means earlier on, what do you want to say? Moshe was rehabilitated. Now what does he want to say? What does kol hashevet kasher mean? The whole tribe is rehabilitated and kosher. Which means Rashi wants to show that the march in Sefer Shmot, in the book of Exodus, is to show that Shevet Levi is really special and unique, and they have learned their lessons right from the past. And in the Pshat, we see this transformation. No collateral damage, right? If they take the sword, it's only in the name of God. And Rashi wants to extend that, right? And we saw earlier. So now we're going to go to Bamidbar. We're not doing Vayikra, because what do we know Vayikra is all about, practically? Shevet Levi in general, right? All their accomplishments and their work in the Mishkan. But now we're going to go to Bamidbar. We're on number 7. We're on page 7, number 7. We have a very interesting story, again, where we see an interface with Shimon and Levi. When Bnei Israel are in the Shittim, right, and they go after the Moabite women, again, what do we see as a theme, right? We see, right, this kind of untoward behavior, right, immodest behavior, when it has to do with women, we see Shevet Levi is involved. Rashi wants to include it also with the Egel. What does Rashi say? What are the 3 things maybe they did with the Egel? Avodah Zarah, right? And Znut, right? And also Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arayot, and Shvichut Damim. But what does he want to include there? Also, Gilui Arayot, the Znut, right? The immodest behavior. But here Bnei Israel are in the Shittim, right? And Bnei Israel are consorting with Benot Moab. And what does Hashem say? Hashem says in Pasuk Dalet, verse 4, he says, take all the leaders and kill them, right? And that's the only way my anger is going to be assuaged. What's so interesting here? Who was angry in Sefer Breshit? Shimon and Levi. Now who's angry? Hashem is angry. And the only thing that will assuage God's anger is what? Killing the leaders of Am Yisrael. And Moshe says to all the leaders, okay, kill all the people who are, consorting with Baal Peor. And someone comes up, right, and he consorts with this woman in front of everyone in public. And it doesn't tell us who it is, right? It just says a leader of Am Yisrael is consorting with this woman in public, right in front of the religious center, the Ohel Moed, right, of Am Yisrael. Look at Pasuk Zayin, verse 7. Vayar Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. When Pinchas sees this, Vayakam mitoch ha'eda v'yikach romach biyado. When Pinchas sees this iniquity, what does he do? And Pinchas is from the Kohen family, right? He is the grandson of Aharon HaKohen. He takes a spear in his hand. And what do we know about a spear? A spear has no collateral damage, right? Whenever you use it on, you spear the individuals, it stays in, right? You have your target, and there's no collateral damage, which means what's the language that is happening here, and what is happening with Shevet Levi? Here we see the grandson of Aharon, right? He takes a stand, whereas Moshe said, oh, all the leaders have to be killed in the name of Hashem. Pinchas takes a spear and only kills the two individuals who committed the crime, which means we started with excessive collateral damage in Sefer Breshit, and what are we ending with? Only the individuals who committed the crime, and even God wants to kill many more people, and Pinchas says, no, we have to keep the damage only to the two main individuals who are desecrating God's name in public. And look how interestingly the story ends. We all know the story, but you have to appreciate the language of the Torah here, because it says these two people are anonymous, but at the end it tells us who these two people are. And who are these two people? Only at the end of the story it tells us. And who are these two people? Look at verse 14. We're on page 8, verse 14. It's Zimri ben Salu, the Nasi of Shimon. Which means, look what happened to the two different Shvatim. Levi has rehabilitated himself, and we have stories about him throughout. Shimon, we don't hear anything about Shevet Shimon throughout all of Chumash. The only story we have is that they are desecrating God's name, doing immodest behavior in front of Am Yisrael, and who has to actually punish Shimon? It is someone from Shevet Levi. And in which way do they do that? Direct punishment, no collateral damage. And what is the brit that Pinchas gets? Right? Look at Pasuk Yud Aleph and Yud Bet, 11 and 12. Pinchas, because he assuaged my anger. What do we have in Sefer Breshit? What do Levi always have? Excessive anger, excessive anger, excessive anger. We said it 6 different ways in the brachot of Yaakov. And yet here, what is the story? What has Pinchas done? Assuaged and lessened God's anger. Not only that, in Sefer Breshit, what do Shimon and Levi take? Revenge, kin'ah, right? They avenged Dinah. What do we see here? Pinchas avenged God's anger, but by doing that, he lessened God's anger and he saved so many individuals. And Pasuk Yud Bet 12 says, so what am I going to give him? I'm going to give him the Brit Shalom, a Brit of peace. What was the original phrasing in the story of Dinah? What did the people of Shechem say? Why are they getting a Brit? Because Shleimim hem itanu. So now, what are Shimon and Levi? What is Shevet Levi? What is Pinchas bringing back? The Brit Shalom, the truthfulness, the no collateral damage, sticking to your principles, keeping the high moral ground. And not only that, and they're beautiful midrashim, which we're not doing right now, but the text really says it very clearly, that what did Pinchas do? He is lessening Hashem's anger. Whereas in Sefer Breshit, right, we have Shevet Levi, excessive anger. Here we have that Pinchas is bringing shalom. He is lessening Hashem's anger. And as a result, he is going to receive the kehuna. And what do we know about Kohanim, right, and Levi'im? They eat truma. They don't get inheritance in the land. They are spread out. But also, right, they don't go to war. What's the problem with Shevet Levi and Sefer Breshit? They're too warmongering. We see they don't go to war. But Rashi brings in another halachic point, which is very good. Look at number 9 on the top. When it says, right, v'chelek lo yeh lecha betocham, it just means that they don't inherit land. They have their places that they live, but they don't inherit land. But what does it mean, v'chelek lo yeh lecha betocham, and ye shall have no portion among them? What does Rashi bring in here? Af babizah. Which means even in the spoils of war, which means what did Shimon and Levi do in Sefer Breshit? They took too much spoils, collateral damage, right? They totally lost the moral high ground by taking the spoils of war. And as a result, what can't what can't Shevet Levi receive? They cannot receive the spoils of war. Similar to the story that we have in Purim, right? What did Amalek, right? What happened with Shaul and Amalek? He takes the spoils of the war. And that's why what can't Bnei Israel do? In Megillat Esther, in the story of Esther, Ubabizah lo shalchu et yadam. Right? So here we have that same idea, which means Shevet Levi cannot enjoy the spoils of war because it's against the principles, it's against who they have become. And also, what are we always worried? This idea, right? Even though they've sublimated for the zealousness for God, right? We want to make sure they stay separate. We want to make sure, right, still, that they don't go to war, and they don't receive the spoils of war. So now we have to see in the end of Chumash, is there a correspondence and is there a difference between the brachot of Yaakov in the end of Sefer Breshit and the brachot of Moshe in the end of Sefer Dvarim? As we said, we're just looking at Chumash, but you could do this throughout all of Tanakh with Shevet Levi. So, what are the brachot of Moshe? Right? He says, Yichi Reuven va'al yamot v'hi mitav mispar. Okay, showing wonderful. Reuven should live and he shouldn't die. Right? Not such a big compliment, but he's a survivor. Right? Zion, right? 7. Here, Yehuda only gets 1 pasuk. Right? Even Yehuda is not the great champion, because what do we know about Shevet Yehuda? They haven't proved themselves yet throughout all the Chumash. Oh, they have a Nachshon bin Aminadav. Oh, they have a Kalev bin Yefuneh. But that's it. Right? They have not shown leadership. We have to wait all the way till David HaMelech comes for Yehuda to really step forward and to fulfill the destiny in Sefer Breshit. But who really fulfilled their destiny throughout Chumash and did tshuva for whatever happened in Sefer Breshit? It's Levi. So our job is to see, is there a correspondence in language? Is there a juxtaposition here? Is there this kind of fulfillment? So let's see. Pasuk Chet and on. U'lelevi amar, tumecha v'urecha le'ish chasidecha. Right? So Levi, they wear the Urim and the Tumim, they wear the breastplate. Le'ish chasidecha. Right? What was Levi in the brachot of Yaakov? Arur apam ki az. They were obstinate. Right? They were not people of chesed. Right? Here, they're ish chasidecha. And here, they were able to withstand all the trials and tribulations in the Midbar. Tet, Pasuk 9. Ha'omer la'avivu li'imo lo re'itiv. Right? When they were defending, right, God's honor with the Egel, right? They didn't look at family relations. They did whatever they had to do. Ki shamru imratecha. In Sefer Breshit, they don't keep the word of Yaakov. They go against the word of Yaakov. And here, what are they? The keepers of the word, right? So we see this change. Ubritcha yinsoru. What are they the keepers of now? The Brit. And of course, the Brit is a double entendre. It's not just the covenant with God. What else is it? The Brit Milah, as Rashi states, right? What was the special thing Shevet Levi kept in the Midbar? They gave the Brit Milah to their children, while all of Bnei Israel did not, but that is something special that Shevet Levi kept. So again, whereas in Sefer Breshit they weren't respectful of the Brit Milah, here we see they're the keepers of the Brit Milah and of the covenant. Pasuk Yud, Yoru Mishpatecha LiYaakov. They're the ones who teach the Mishpat, the laws of Yaakov. What did they do in Sefer Breshit? They went against Yaakov, right? He criticizes them and they say, well, you're not the boss here, you're not making the right decision. And yet, what are they here? They are the ones who keep the covenant, right? And the words of Yaakov. V'toratcha Yisrael. Yasimu k'torah be'apecha. Instead of apam ki az, of their anger being evil and being bad and not constructive, what do they do here? They put k'toret, right? They bring the incense be'apecha, in the nose of Hashem. But what's the word for apam? Anger, right? And apecha. So they went from being the people of anger to assuaging God's anger with the Ktoret, because that's really what the Ktoret does, and the same language of apecha, the kalil al mizbechecha, right? What's the end? Yud Aleph, Barach Beirach Hashem Chelo. What did it say in Breshit? Vet kol chelam, right? All their wealth, they took all their wealth, right? And it was a criticism of Shimon and Levi. Here, what is Moshe ending the brachot with? Barech Hashem Chelo, right? Their wealth and their possessions will be blessed. Upoal yadav tirtzeh, and they enjoy the actions of their hands. What did we say earlier? They took the sword in their hand and they killed the entire city, and now their actions, right, are desirable in the face of Hashem. Machatz motnayim kamav umisanav min yikumun. But don't be fooled by this. Still, what are they? They are tough. And if they gird their loins to fight against someone, they are a very difficult enemy, which means even though they don't go to war and they don't do all those things, they are still tough. This idea of their steadfastness, right, and of being individuals of principle, right, but instead of going over the amount, over the limit, collateral damage, not knowing how to channel, right, those strengths, we see by the end they're able to channel those strengths. And what Rashi wants to say, we did the one with the Brit Milah, I just want to end because it's before Hanukkah, so we did Parshat Vayishlach, and now we're going to Hanukkah, right? We're sandwiching in between. Machatz Matnaim Kamal. What do we know about the Hashmonaim? They're from Shevet Levi. They are Kohanim, right? What do we know about them? They are tough. That in the end of the days of the Hashmonaim, what are they going to do? They're going to fight to defend God's honor, which means that zealousness is something that they still have. It's just channeled in different ways. And the Hashmonaim are going to be a tough enemy, right? And they are going to fight, right, against the Syrian Greeks. But also it's trying to say, right, when Rashi wants to bring this message to the future, he's saying also the message of Shevet Levi. It's not just to Bnei Hashmonai, but here you have these individuals, right, who had these character traits, who in the end of Sefer Breshit, right, are really almost written out of history in a sense, and could really see their future as written off the map, and yet Levi rehabilitates, right, itself throughout all of Chumash, whereas Shimon does not take that opportunity. And if you look at the brachot of Moshe at the end, Shevet Shimon is not even mentioned. And almost throughout all of Navi, we're looking, right, to try to find, right, what are some of the activities of Shevet Shimon. So here we see a very interesting example, right, of how the language and the narrative and the story, right, and the message, right, really travel from Sefer Breshit to the end of, we just did it within the Chumash, till the end of Sefer Dvarim. And we see the language of the brachot, the correspondence between the two, and the actions and the language that's used throughout the entire story of Shevet Levi is always referring back to the story of Dinah, right, and to show the rehabilitative process, right, that happened with Shevet Levi. Okay, I'm open to questions. Yes?
Two questions. One sort of a global one and one specific. The global one is everything that you pointed out about Levi's rehabilitation follows really from Moshe being the key figure. But Moshe is picked before any of that happens. Moshe is picked by God before all of the rehabilitation that you pointed out happens. So how come Moshe is picked? If Levi was such a problematic character, you would have thought that the leader would come maybe from Yosef. So, I mean, all the rehabilitation, it just happens afterwards. I'm puzzled by that. The second, more specific question is, you mentioned at one point, you talked about Esav and his collateral damage. What collateral damage did Esav?
Not Esav, Shimon and Levi.
No, but you were talking, when you made some parallels in the course.
No, that Esav is always using his sword, al charbachat tichyeh. Actually, with Esav, we don't have collateral damage. It's just
Yaakov who does all the collateral damage.
Yaakov acts, right, very proactively. But yeah, no, we didn't discuss Esav and the collateral damage, but definitely Shimon and Levi. But they're using the tools of Esav. Whereas Esav, we don't find necessarily collateral damage, at least not yet, right? In Chumash here, we do find it with Shimon and Levi. So they don't even know how to use the sword in the right way, and Yaakov is telling them that you really went beyond the limits. But with Moshe, I think a very important point to mention there is that Moshe really develops, right? Again, he's chosen mibeten, right? He's chosen from birth, right? But the pshat in the Chumash really shows his development as we see him, which means when he grows up and he really goes out to his brothers, which means if he would not have that compassion, he would not show these leadership abilities. The question is, would he have made it to leadership potential, which means many times we have leaders who have the potential, but they don't really realize it.
Isn't he a pretty problematic leader?
Who?
Moshe.
Well, that's not for tonight. I don't agree, but this would be too quick to discuss. But I do want to make one other comment. What is the famous midrash about Shevet Levi in Mitzrayim? That already in the beginning of Shevet, already during the time of the Shiabud in Mitzrayim, that Levi was already chosen, right, for this, spiritual role. That already they were rehabilitating themselves even before Moshe was born, right? They didn't work according to the Midrash. They didn't partake in the enslavement. And that's why, right, Moshe was chosen from that Shevet. So this idea is actually a very early idea, even pre-Moshe in the Midrash. But in the Chumash, in the Pshat, right, we see that the process really starts with Moshe and with his actions. His Bechira is one thing, right, his birth, but the fact that he acts upon it, right, and he tries to defend Am Yisrael, only then God chooses him. The sneh happens after, right, he tries to save Am Yisrael, and not afterwards.
It's interesting that all of his rehabilitation, so to speak, is violence. I mean, Moshe kills somebody. They kill, every one of those rehabs is murder, is violence. It's not a Jewish, theoretically a Jewish thing. The Hashmonaim are also violent people. So we're equating God with violence. And that's an interesting, that sometimes we must be violent.
Right, but I do want to get back to the point that what don't Shevet Levi do? I guess we didn't emphasize that enough, but I do want to emphasize that. What don't Shevet Levi do? Right, they don't go to war. They don't take the spoils of war.
Hashmonaim went to war.
Right, but that was unusual. When they have to do it, right, no, when they have to do it, they have to do it. That's the whole point, which means, usually they don't do it, but when it's called for, they do it. Just like Pinchas, right? He was already a Kohen. He should not have used, weapons. But my son is in Golani in the Israeli army, so, I understand that sometimes, we have to use klei neshek. Okay, thank you very much.